Hello everyone, welcome to Gelvin Valley for Farming Simulator 15, created by our friend Wild Wild Wes. And I'm over here kind of at the main farm. I think what I want to do is get, let me hook this up, get our windrower headed over to the radio field. And I'm trying to remember, do I have something to take it over there? Tower outline, storage shop, pasture, beef to store. This one may get close, but beef 203. Storage to, yeah, that doesn't quite take it all the way. I can't recall if I have one up here either. Alright, but this will get close enough. Beef to store. And maybe that starts outside of the gate here. Let me just see here. Yep. I think that is where it's going to start. So, actually, let me make sure it's point A to point B transfer. Alright, can I go? No. Goodness gracious. Oh, course play doesn't have a brain either. Let me see if it'll start. There we go. There is something here. I think if I get past this, it'll... There we go. Alright. I think it'll eventually get up there. I'm going to head up the hill to our tractor, and we are going to continue mowing. We're up here on top, up on the radio field, kind of up on a pinnacle. There's the radio tower, so there's just kind of a little bit of mowing here to do, and trying to, oops, I need to put that down. We'll figure out here what exactly I'm going to do. I don't know, I may try to just wrap these bales and turn them into silage, sell them. We'll see. I kind of, in another save that I have, Farm Sim 15, you know, in this version of Farming Sim, if I recall correctly, silage was a pretty big deal in terms of how much money you could make, and it really, I think, was almost, well, not quite game breaking, but it really was more, it just kind of loaded you up with too much cash. And I think in later games, unless I'm thinking of Farm Sim 13, later versions kind of corrected the problem, having less, they lowered the selling price, I think, of silage to kind of compensate for that. But I think in Farm Sim 15, you do get dinged, you know, kind of like the trouble I've had in here of, you run into trouble when you sell things, when you sell a lot of it, there's a glut kind of on the market, and the price, you know, diminishes. We've talked about that dynamic in here before, how, you know, you have to, when you sell a whole bunch, you have to wait hours and hours of real time until the price recovers. And you only have a single hour before the price changes, so, or registers the impact. So we've talked a little strategy-wise on how to sell in here. And it's no different with silage. I think silage is part of the, I think that would be part of the economy. So, you know, your silage price is going to diminish over time if you sell too much of it all at once, just like any other commodity. And in this map in particular, Wes made it more difficult to sell silage. You know, I know you can sell it kind of on one of the farms, but you're limited how much it'll allow you to sell. The trigger disappears into the map, and at the other place, the price is severely depressed. I almost think when I looked at the map, he had it set at maybe 22%. I don't know. It was something crazy low, so it loses its appeal for just making a whole lot of money. However, I since have learned in the Lua code that not so with silage bales. I learned this over on my Touring save, and there is no impact to... Oh, this is crazy steep. There is no impact to the price in the economy model or whatever when you sell silage bales. It just doesn't impact it, so you can sell silage bales all day long and you'll receive a good price. Whoop. It's kind of hard to run this around. And I see our tractor and windrower survived, so let me set the brakes. I'm gonna head down here, and maybe what I'll do, I'll just take that off, and I'll at least get it turned around. And I'll just park it there, turn it off. Oh, good thing it has full fuel. I got a little bit more work to do here in finishing the mowing. So, probably should be putting the trailed mower kind of off to the side instead of doing it the way I'm doing it, but oh well, so sue me. It's kind of this bald patch in the grass here for some reason. Maybe I should try to... All I'd have to do is come up here with a plow, rip some of this out, and replant to grass. Yeah, wouldn't take long, would be pretty easy to do. Anywho, so I'm kind of thinking up here, a way to make some money might be just to turn these into silage bales and sell them. So that maybe what I try to do, and it'll be a good way to earn some money kind of while I'm waiting for time to run out here to advance the clock. And I'm still I'll remind everybody we have a hailstorm coming tomorrow, and I don't want to plant prior to the end because I don't want my crop taken out. I'm pretty sure I have the hail damage mod in here, so I want to make sure I listen to the weatherman and not plant until after the storm is passed. Anyways, I make my rounds, and I think of something to bore you all with in here. I think I've mentioned a number of times I work, my profession is probably in one of the, what most people would conceive of the most boring, straight-laced occupation that anybody could ever have. Whoa! That's going to be hard to kind of mow that outcropping there. I'm basically mowing a cliff. It's treating my mower as a pendulum. I wonder if last time I just didn't go down as far, maybe. Anyway, they make them out of stern stuff, the folks of Gelvin Valley and their farming. Come on, get up the hill. So, in my day job, I'm what's called a CPA, Certified Public Accountant, and I went to school for this, and when you go to school, you basically get a degree in business administration, or that's kind of what I did, and you have what they call the accounting option. You know, other folks get a degree in business administration, and they maybe have a marketing focus, or management focus, or operations, some of those kinds of things. I have one in accounting. It's it's a standard degree, and then to earn your license, it takes a couple years, typically following your schooling as you work in public accounting. Although I don't think you have to work strictly in public accounting. I think it's a little bit easier if you do. And then you have a test you have to take, called the CPA exam, 4 sections, and it usually takes a couple days to complete. So it's a pretty hefty test, with all sorts of knowledge base that you have to know. Not only financial accounting for several industries, whether governmental to not-for-profit to manufacturing, and all sorts of concepts in accounting, whether it's financial reporting or how inventory costing is to work, just the whole gambit. You also have to have some knowledge of internal accounting, cost accounting principles. You have to have knowledge of taxation and tax. Oh my goodness, it changes every year. The politicians are always creating something new in legislation, so it's a constant moving target. You got to know. Although there's some principles, that haven't changed, irrespective of what Congress does. There's principles of business law. I mean, we don't have to be lawyers, of course. That isn't our discipline, but we read and use a lot of, what the lawyers draft, and we need to understand them as to how to record them, in terms of transactions that the business community would have. So there's just a broad range of knowledge you have to tap into to get your CPA license, and it's a tough test. Fortunately, you're allowed to take it multiple times, although you're charged every single time you take it. But at the end of the day, when you get those 3 letters behind your name, CPA, what it allows you to do, what the specific license allows you to do, is to write an opinion on a set of financial statements to indicate whether they are in accordance with some standard of accounting, if you will. And the old jokes they would say about accountants, how to hire an accountant, and they ask them, well, what's 2 plus 2? And the one you hire is, well, what do you want it to be? It's which is kind of funny, because the profession seems to attract people who have a more black and white mindset, that there's just one way and there's a right way and the wrong way. And really, what you start to learn is there are all sorts of different ways to make a set of books, and so that's part of the training you go through. But in general, for most of the economy, we would write an opinion on a set of financial statements, whether they are in accordance primarily with what's called generally accepted accounting principles. And I know that sounds just super exciting, makes a lady swoon and all that sort of thing. But that's kind of just what it literally is. Most people, I would say, in our country, if you tell them you're a CPA, they assume you do something with taxes. And it's true, probably most CPAs do. But really, when you keep it right down to brass tacks, you don't have to be a CPA to prepare a tax return or work, in a business that helps others prepare their tax returns. But you do have to have a CPA license to write an opinion on financial statements. So that's ultimately, what our license allows. And, some CPA firms out there, they only offer tax services, or maybe they are a type of consultants. I've met CPAs before who do a lot of M&A work, merger and acquisition, where they know enough tax to help them with that part of it, but they help companies acquire other companies or merge with other companies, divest, spin off ventures, whatever. So they don't do either tax or write opinions on financial statements, but they have, certainly understand what they're reading. So there's all sorts of, it's a pretty versatile profession, when it comes to that. But again, I keep coming back to the root purpose of our licensure is to render an opinion on a set of financial statements as being in accordance or not in accordance with a given set of standards. So, given that this is our license, something that, if an accounting firm does this service, and the one I'm part of does, we consider ourselves, a full service accounting firm, so we do a little bit of everything. We do everything from tax returns, we do business consulting, our clients are involved in merger and acquisition, and we help them through those things, and we also write opinions on financial statements, meaning we do audits of financial statements if we are asked to do that, or there are lesser degrees of service, and I risk boring the stuffing out of anybody listening to this if I haven't lost them already. It's just our profession admittedly just doesn't have the pizzazz, and some of that maybe is our own fault as accountants, and our lack of ability, or probably more likely our lack of willingness to effectively communicate a lot of times the work that we do. Because I think it's plenty exciting. I've had a whole career at it, and honestly, I get more enjoyment out of it the longer that I do it. Particularly the people side of it, getting to help businesses accomplish their goals, and seeing families work together in business, or people working for businesses and helping them with their finances. It's, to me, that's the rewarding part of what I do, is getting to help another person do what they do and help them succeed. But back to the purpose for the license. So what that means is that there's a certain amount of regulation. My CPA license is given to me by the state that I live in, state of Oregon. And so I answer to the Board of Accountancy for my state for my license. And so does every other CPA, by the way. But there is some additional scrutiny that is put on CPAs who render opinions on financial statements or write reports. Because there are certain professional standards we have to follow, certain ethical standards, rules of how to conduct things like audits and other things, that we do. And we all have to follow those rules, or we're not doing an appropriate job. It's kind of like some other professions. If you were an architect and you designed a faulty building and they put it up and then it toppled and fell over, I mean, the public outcry would be huge. They would want your head. Well, it's similar, with accountants. We have a responsibility, or CPA accountants rather, we have a responsibility to the public that when we put our opinion on it, that we have done exactly what we say we've done in examining the details, and because people rely on the work that we do. And probably everybody listening to this, understands what a 401k is. They understand investments, and everybody, if you have a few retirement investments, you want your investment choices to be good ones. And what are those choices made on? Well, a lot of times it is the financial data behind all those companies traded on the stock exchange and what have you. And if we cheat, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, mistakes can be made. People can place reliance on data that is unreliable and they don't even know it. And so we do have a duty to the public to make sure companies are properly reporting their data when it comes to financial statements with an accounts report on them. So given that responsibility, what it means is if you do that kind of work, you are going to be under a certain amount of scrutiny. And so what that means, like for me, for our little accounting firm, is every 3 years, our profession, I guess would that be a triennial, we go through what's called a peer review. So we hire someone to come in and look over our processes, our procedures. They take a look at jobs that we did, clients that we served, and reports that we issued. And they take a deep dive to see if we are following professional standards. And so that's kind of the reason. That's kind of what I was getting to here a month or two ago. We just went through it as a firm. And I say as a firm, I kind of feel like I'm the one that went through it. At our accounting firm, one of my areas of responsibility is our accounting and attest practice. We call it a test because you are attesting to the veracity of something, namely financial statements. So it's my responsibility to make sure the procedures and policy that we have at our firm follows the professional regulations. I got to make sure our staff are following it. I got to make sure we are, as a firm, following the rules. And some of it is simple as, some of the education that we take, making sure we have enough of it and that people are taking the right education, and, that our file protocols are sound, and on and on and on. And again, I realize I run the risk of boring the stuffing out of people, but, other professionals got to go through this too. Like I mentioned, the architect, there's probably an approval process for engineers to look over what they did, to edit whether a building was to end or fall, or a bridge or whatever. So it's really no different, only in this case it's in the financial world, to make sure we are following everything that we should, and that the reports that we have issued are appropriate. And the rules are voluminous, they are many. We have all sorts of computer programs to try to help us with it, but there's, and it's one of those things too, where someone comes in and they're always going to find something you can improve on. And, most of us would say, well, I know I'm not perfect, but, I do the best I can. Well, that's what we would say too. But it truly is, we're not perfect. So as hard as we try, it should be no surprise that when they come in, they always find something. And the question is how bad is the thing that they found? And when I say bad in this context, it might be on a financial statement. Let's say we missed a disclosure. Well, was the missed disclosure so egregious, that it was, what we would call material, where it would have changed an investor's mind, or whoever's using and relying on the financial statements that we set out, had they had the correct disclosure, would it have changed anything in their mind? So that's kind of the bar that you have. And so fortunately, this time here, I'm pleased that any of the stuff, they wrote us up on was basically immaterial, or wouldn't have caused any changes in the mind of someone who read or relied on the financials. So, I'm thankful to be through the process. It's something that takes a ton of time, and most of it falls on me. Because I'm responsible for it. So there's a lot of prep work I gotta do, to get ready for them to come in and look things over. And so I'm just thankful to make it through another one and have a clean report. And that's something you can share with our clients and everything. We are, uh, and this is something, clients maybe don't even care. What they care is getting the report at probably the most inexpensive cost that they can. But I'll tell you, if the work isn't done and your CPA firm has a poor reputation, it's not unheard of for banks and other users to say, you need a different CPA. We don't trust this one. So it's good to have a stellar reputation, because if you don't, your work isn't seen the best, in the community. So it's helpful to maintain that, but it's also costly to have standards. Anytime you have what are called internal controls or standards, to put out quality, you pay a price for it. Maybe it takes a little bit longer to do the work, requires a little bit more training, and cha-ching, you add all that up, and it's expensive. And so what you hope is that you have clients who value that and are willing to pay you for it. Because if you ultimately don't receive compensation for it in the marketplace, well, then you just as well not do it. Meaning you shouldn't even do this work. So I've been at the past couple months, and I'm glad it's something, that only comes every 3 years, because of the amount of work that it is. I don't get a dime. We have to pay people to come in and do it, so I have to fit this in with everything else. Why am I not turning? There we go. I have to fit it in with everything else on my plate, serving clients, and be able to do it, and it just takes hours of time. So I'm glad it only comes up every 3 years. But I tell myself it is good for me to go through it, because we audit some of our clients, and oh, I feel bad for them sometimes. This is the closest I can come to being on the receiving end of an audit, because they're essentially auditing us, this other firm, when they come in. But we audit a bunch of clients, and we send them big lists of things that we need in order to audit. When people think of audit, they think of pretty heavy scrutiny, and it's true. It's invasive. We ask for a lot of things to look at, and that's part of what an audit is. And for our clients, just like for me, it takes a lot of time to prepare, and oftentimes, the unfortunate thing is, it may be the owners of the company who want the audit, but it's their staff who pay the price, by having to carve out time in their day to work on it, in amongst everything else, that they're doing. So, but I figure it's good for me to go through our own. Man, this thing is. There we go. Not one to turn. I figure it's good for me to go through it, in the form of a peer review, because it helps me have a little more compassion, understanding when we hand off a list to a client, to know kind of what they're going through, and to be, I guess what it's taught me a lot is to be thankful. I try to always thank a client in advance for their work on it, because I know it's going to take a lot. So, alright, let me park this puppy and head down here. Alright, let me climb the hill. Yeah, for some reason I thought I had a course play that would take me all the way up here. But there is all sorts of things I could bore everybody with, on this process. The reach of quality and trying to maintain quality is very broad, and it involves, there's a manual we have at our firm called unimaginatively the quality control manual, and I drafted it, wrote every doggone word. I'm probably the only one that has read it thoroughly. We give it to our staff to read, and each year we try to go over it again in brief. We don't read it in detail at a meeting, but I want constant exposure to it so that people know what to do, and so there's no excuse. If something goes wrong and it's because someone didn't read the manual or whatever, there's no excuse. And really, we don't, it's not that we're trying to find someone to blame. We just don't want that thing to go wrong or to happen, that's bad. So we want to be prepared. And so, yeah, I drafted that thing. That also gets tweaked and changed every year. Our profession just went through, they put out some more regulations, and I had to redraft, totally rewrite the whole thing, top to bottom, here towards the end of 2025. So, yeah, maybe someday if I ever run out of things to talk about, I could just bring it on here and read it. I bet everybody would love it. But then it also is involved, we do a lot of training in-house, so it's picking topics to go over. And then also, I mentioned someone coming in from the outside to look us over. We also annually do our own internal look. So, we're not a huge firm. We have maybe 30 people or whatever at any given time, and all of us responsible for varying projects. So we try to cross-check each other's work once a year on a sample basis, just like the peer reviewer would. So we check the things that the peer reviewer look at, we pull a sample of our jobs, and we shake it top to bottom and see if we are following what we're supposed to be following. And we find things too. Like I say, there's always things you find, and we talk about those things. We have our own internal practice aids to try to warn ourselves, on later jobs, that we would tuck our shirt in on various things. So, it feels like you are constantly just looking over your shoulder in some ways, to make sure you're following and doing everything you should be doing. There we go. I wonder if this tractor is strong enough. I probably need to... Yeah, there, I need to put it on four-wheel drive, diff lock, and everything. Anyway, I think I've bored everybody sufficiently this time. Suffice it to say, I am very happy we survived our peer review. It means I can keep practicing, I can keep earning a living for my family, so that makes me happy. Whoa, I couldn't even turn. Didn't want to turn. But anyways, thank you so much for... I can't even talk and chew bubble gum at the same time. I have the diff lock on. How come it would... Anyways. Alright, I need to figure this thing out. I think it's the rugged terrain I'm navigating over up here. Thank you, like I said, once again, for coming along to listen to me ramble on even about my humble occupation. I know you all have your own issues to deal with, so until we meet again the next time, you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming by.